You can be famous, beloved, and still feel utterly alone. Keanu Reeves had everything, except peace. But one night, broken and exhausted, he whispered a single sentence into the dark. "Where are you watching from?" Because what happened after that whisper is why millions are still crying today. The studio lights cast a warm golden glow across the intimate set, creating an atmosphere that feels more like a living room than a television stage. The audience sits in hushed anticipation, their collective breath held as if they sense something extraordinary is about to unfold. Camera operators move with deliberate silence, their equipment capturing every nuance of this sacred space where vulnerability meets millions of viewers. The production crew, seasoned professionals who have witnessed countless interviews, seem unusually still, as if they too understand that tonight will be different. Oprah Winfrey, the empress of authentic conversation, sits with her trademark warmth radiating from every gesture. Her presence commands respect not through dominance, but through an almost maternal ability to create safety in the most exposed moments. Across from her, Keanu Reeves enters the frame with that familiar mixture of humility and quiet strength that has made him beloved across generations. His movements are measured, contemplative, carrying the weight of someone who has learned that true power lies in restraint. There's a hesitation in his step, not from fear, but from the deep consideration of a man who understands the gravity of what he's about to share. The introduction flows with practiced elegance as Oprah acknowledges the rarity of this moment. Her voice carries decades of experience in drawing truth from the most guarded hearts. She speaks of Keanu not just as the Hollywood icon who has graced our screens for decades, but as a human being whose quiet dignity has always suggested depths unexplored. The tension in the air is palpable, electric with possibility. When Oprah admits her uncertainty about how open Keanu will be regarding matters of faith, something he has historically kept private, the audience leans forward almost imperceptibly. Keanu's response comes with that characteristic soft smile that has disarmed critics and charmed audiences worldwide. His words, simple yet profound, carry the weight of a decision made in solitude. When he says there are things that need to be spoken, despite their difficulty, his voice holds a tremor that speaks to years of internal wrestling. This is not a man seeking attention or sympathy, but someone who has arrived at a place where silence feels more burdensome than vulnerability. The conversation shifts as Oprah poses the question that will crack open the evening. Her inquiry about what first turned Keanu toward faith is delivered with the gentle precision of a master interviewer who knows that the right question at the right moment can unlock universes. The studio grows even quieter, if such a thing is possible, as everyone present recognizes they are about to witness something sacred. Keanu's narrative unfolds like a gentle river finding its course. He speaks of a night that exists in the memory of anyone who has ever felt truly alone, not just physically, but spiritually adrift in a world that suddenly feels too big and too empty. The pressures of fame, which most people can only imagine, become tangible as he describes them. But it's the deeper wounds, the losses that cut beneath the surface of public persona, that give his words their devastating honesty. The death of his girlfriend Jennifer Syme and their daughter Ava in 1999 represents a kind of grief that fame cannot shield against, money cannot heal, and success cannot diminish. His description of that pivotal night in the park transforms the studio into a confessional. Every word is chosen carefully, not from calculation, but from the deep respect he holds for the sacred nature of what he's sharing. The image he paints of sitting alone, feeling utterly depleted, resonates with anyone who has ever reached the end of their own strength. When he reveals his first prayer, the simplicity of it is breathtaking. He didn't ask for miracles or grand interventions. He asked only for a sign that he wasn't utterly alone in the universe. The tremor in his voice as he speaks these words creates a ripple effect throughout the studio. This is vulnerability stripped of performance, honesty without agenda. His eyes, usually so carefully controlled, show a distance that suggests he's not just remembering that night, but temporarily returning to it. The courage required to share this moment, especially for someone who has spent decades protecting his privacy, becomes evident to everyone watching. The metaphor he offers flows with the natural poetry of someone who has spent considerable time contemplating these mysteries. Faith as light glimpsed through darkness, not powerful enough to eliminate pain entirely, but sufficient to illuminate the next step forward. This image resonates because it acknowledges suffering without diminishing it, while still offering hope without false promises. It's the kind of wisdom that can only come from someone who has walked through actual darkness and found genuine light. The cameras capture the audience reaction with exquisite timing, revealing faces that mirror the emotional journey unfolding on stage. Tears flow freely, not from manipulation, but from recognition. These are people seeing their own struggles reflected in the words of someone they thought they knew, only to discover depths they never imagined. The soft murmur of whispered conversation suggests that Keanu's honesty is creating space for others to acknowledge their own spiritual hunger. Oprah's response demonstrates why she has become synonymous with meaningful conversation. Her own tears fall without shame or attempt to redirect attention. When she shares her own experience of prayer during periods of intense criticism, she creates a bridge between her story and Keanu's, showing that faith often emerges not from comfort, but from necessity. Her question about what changed after that first prayer opens the door for Keanu to explore the practical implications of spiritual awakening. His answer reveals a transformation that goes beyond religious conversion to something more fundamental. The shift from needing external validation to finding internal sufficiency represents a kind of spiritual maturation that many people spend lifetimes seeking. When he speaks of no longer requiring recognition to feel complete, he's describing a freedom that transcends fame, wealth, or any external measure of success. The decision to invite audience participation transforms the conversation from interview to movement. Oprah's request for viewers to share their own transformative moments through social media creates a digital congregation united by common experience. The hashtag #FaithAndFuture becomes more than marketing, it becomes an invitation to community. As the studio screens display incoming tweets and posts, the individual stories begin to weave together into a larger narrative of human resilience and spiritual seeking. The messages that appear on screen carry the raw honesty that Keanu's vulnerability has inspired. Stories of hope discovered in job loss, faith found in forgiveness, strength uncovered in weakness, each one adding another thread to the tapestry of shared human experience. The studio audience watches these stories unfold with the kind of attention usually reserved for family photo albums, recognizing themselves in strangers' struggles and triumphs. The atmosphere in the studio has transformed completely from its initial tension. What began as anticipation has evolved into intimacy, as if the invisible barriers between performer and audience, celebrity and viewer, have dissolved. Keanu and Oprah exchange glances that speak to the profound connection that authentic vulnerability creates between human beings. There's no pretense here, no performance, just two people who have discovered that their individual struggles are part of a larger human story. Oprah's observation about faith as a connecting force rather than a solitary experience crystallizes the evening's central revelation. When she speaks of faith not being merely personal but fundamentally communal, she's articulating something that the audience is experiencing in real time. The studio has become a temporary sanctuary where people feel safe to acknowledge their deepest questions and longings. Keanu's agreement carries the weight of someone who has moved from isolation to connection through his own spiritual journey. His metaphor of faith as a door opening to larger questions suggests that authentic spirituality expands rather than narrows our engagement with mystery. This is not faith as escape from complexity, but faith as courage to embrace even greater unknowns. The transition to deeper theological territory feels organic rather than forced. Oprah's question about which biblical passages have most deeply affected Keanu promises to take the conversation from personal experience to textual exploration. The audience settles in for what they sense will be another layer of revelation, another opportunity to discover unexpected depths in someone they thought they knew. This moment has become viral not through manufactured drama or controversial statements, but through the simple power of authentic human connection. In an age of curated personas and calculated revelations, Keanu's genuine vulnerability cuts through digital noise to touch something elemental in human experience. His willingness to share his most private spiritual moments creates permission for others to acknowledge their own sacred questions and experiences. The conversation deepens as Keanu begins to explore the specific moments that shaped his understanding of faith. His voice takes on a different quality as he recalls a particular sleepless night, one of many that have punctuated his journey through grief and searching. In the quiet hours when the world sleeps and the mind refuses to rest, he found himself drawn to pages he had never seriously considered before. The Gospel of Luke lay open before him, not as homework or obligation, but as a desperate man's attempt to find something, anything, that might offer perspective on a world that often feels senseless. The story of the Good Samaritan emerged from those pages like water in a desert. Keanu's retelling carries the wonder of someone who discovered something both ancient and immediately relevant. The parable, which so many have heard countless times, struck him with fresh force in his moment of seeking. Here was a narrative that transcended the boundaries he had always accepted as immutable. Race, social status, religious affiliation, personal history, all the categories that divide human beings from one another dissolved in the face of simple, radical compassion. His connection to this ancient story reveals layers of personal struggle that fame and success could never address. The admission that he once believed strength meant complete self-reliance resonates with anyone who has mistaken isolation for independence. In Hollywood's ecosystem of competition and image management, vulnerability often gets mistaken for weakness. Yet the parable offered him a different definition of power, one measured not by what you can accumulate or protect, but by what you can give and how you can serve. The metaphor he offers flows with the natural wisdom of someone who has wrestled with mystery and emerged not with answers, but with peace about the questions. Faith as a river that carries you even when you cannot see the destination speaks to anyone who has ever had to move forward without guarantees. It's a profound rejection of the modern demand for certainty, replacing it with trust in the journey itself. This image captures something essential about spiritual life that rigid dogma often misses: the dynamic, flowing nature of authentic faith. The studio atmosphere shifts as Keanu ventures into more challenging territory, acknowledging the internal conflicts that authentic faith inevitably brings. His admission of doubt carries particular weight in a culture that often demands either complete belief or total skepticism, leaving little room for the honest wrestling that characterizes genuine spiritual seeking. The fear of being perceived as inauthentic or hypocritical in the public eye adds another layer of complexity to his journey. In an industry where image often matters more than substance, professing faith can feel like professional suicide or, worse, calculated manipulation. His description of Hollywood's relationship with spirituality reveals the broader cultural tensions that many Americans navigate daily. The entertainment industry's frequent dismissal of faith as either naive escapism or manipulative control creates an environment where genuine seeking must often happen in secret. When Keanu speaks of people claiming that faith requires abandoning reason, he's addressing one of the most persistent false dichotomies of our time. His response demonstrates a sophisticated understanding that refuses to accept this artificial choice between intellectual integrity and spiritual exploration. Oprah's challenge about reconciling logical thinking with faith opens space for a conversation that many viewers have longed to hear. Her question carries the weight of someone who has spent decades navigating between evidence-based reasoning and experiential knowing. Keanu's response offers a framework that refuses to pit science against spirituality, instead positioning them as addressing different aspects of human experience. When he speaks of faith answering questions that science hasn't yet reached, particularly humanity's deep hunger for meaning and purpose, he's articulating something that resonates across denominational and philosophical boundaries. The social media responses appearing on studio screens create a real-time dialogue that extends far beyond the immediate audience. These brief testimonies from viewers reveal that Keanu's honest exploration is giving others permission to acknowledge their own spiritual questions. The tweet about faith being a journey rather than a destination captures something essential about the conversation unfolding on stage. It reflects a mature understanding that spiritual life is dynamic rather than static, characterized more by growth than by arrival. The vulnerability continues as Oprah shares her own deeply personal journey, transforming the interview from interrogation to mutual exploration. Her willingness to revisit the painful terrain of childhood poverty and abuse demonstrates the courage required for authentic spiritual conversation. These experiences, which could have easily led to bitterness or cynicism, instead became the foundation for a hard-won wisdom about forgiveness and grace. Her admission that she once equated forgiveness with weakness reveals a common misconception that prevents many people from experiencing the liberation that comes with releasing resentment. The connection she draws between Keanu's discussion of the Good Samaritan and her own understanding of grace creates a bridge between their individual stories. When she speaks of loving others regardless of who they are, she's describing a kind of love that transcends merit or worthiness. This isn't sentimental affection but the demanding work of seeing dignity in every human being, even those who have caused harm. Her question about how Keanu applies this compassion in daily life moves the conversation from theoretical to practical, asking how ancient wisdom translates into contemporary living. Keanu's response reveals the intersection of spiritual principle and celebrity reality. His commitment to truly listening, whether to fans or critics, represents a radical departure from the defensive postures that fame often encourages. The simple act of genuine attention becomes a form of ministry, acknowledging the fundamental human need to be seen and heard. His observation that sometimes a simple nod is sufficient speaks to the power of presence over performance, connection over correction. The recognition of shared experience between these two very different people illuminates something universal about spiritual seeking. Their discovery that faith is more about becoming than believing, more about journey than destination, reflects a mature spirituality that many viewers recognize in their own lives. Oprah's observation that Keanu reminds her that faith is about becoming the best version of yourself captures the transformative rather than merely comforting nature of authentic spirituality. Keanu's response that Oprah reminds him that none of us walk alone speaks to the communal dimension of faith that individualistic culture often overlooks. This mutual recognition creates a moment of profound connection that extends beyond personal friendship to something approaching spiritual kinship. The laughter that punctuates this exchange carries the joy of recognition, the delight of finding unexpected common ground with someone whose journey has taken very different external forms. As the conversation prepares to venture into even more challenging territory, the question about what aspects of faith most challenge Keanu promises to explore the tensions that make spiritual life dynamic rather than static. The anticipation builds not for conflict or controversy, but for the kind of honest exploration that occurs when people feel safe enough to examine their deepest questions without fear of judgment or manipulation. The silence that follows this question carries weight, as if everyone in the studio understands they are about to witness something profound. Keanu's pause is not hesitation but contemplation, the careful consideration of someone who has learned that words about faith carry consequences beyond the moment they are spoken. When he finally speaks, his voice carries a tremor that suggests he is venturing into territory that still feels tender, still requires courage to navigate. The challenge he reveals strikes at the heart of human experience, the brutal difficulty of extending to oneself the same compassion one might offer a stranger. Self-forgiveness, he explains, has become his greatest spiritual battlefield. The admission carries particular power coming from someone whose public image has been carefully constructed around quiet dignity and mysterious distance. Here is a man whom millions admire confessing to the same internal struggles that torment ordinary people in their private moments. His acknowledgement of past mistakes breaks through the mythology that surrounds celebrity, revealing the human being beneath the carefully managed persona. These are not the dramatic failures that make headlines, but the smaller betrayals and disappointments that accumulate in any life lived fully. The way he speaks of mistakes in work and relationships suggests a conscience that holds itself to standards that fame could easily erode. His reference to being defined by failures rather than transcending them touches something universal about human psychology, the tendency to reduce our entire identity to our worst moments. The scripture he quotes carries particular resonance in this context. The verse about becoming a new creation in Christ speaks to transformation that goes beyond self-improvement or positive thinking. This is not about denying past failures but about embracing an identity that transcends them. The way he delivers these words suggests they are not theoretical concepts but lived truths that he returns to when self-condemnation threatens to overwhelm grace. Oprah's question about daily practice moves the conversation from abstract theology to concrete living. Her inquiry recognizes that spiritual insights mean nothing without practical application, that transformation requires not just understanding but sustained action. Keanu's response reveals a spirituality grounded in simplicity rather than complexity, focused on basic human kindness rather than elaborate religious practices. His commitment to treating strangers with kindness speaks to faith translated into immediate action. In a culture increasingly divided by suspicion and hostility toward the unfamiliar, this simple practice becomes quietly revolutionary. The choice to listen more than speak challenges the ego-driven communication that dominates so much of contemporary discourse. His honest admission that this is not always easy adds credibility to his testimony, acknowledging that spiritual growth requires ongoing effort rather than one-time conversion. The conversation shifts as Oprah shares her own greatest challenge, revealing how her platform in media has given her a front-row seat to humanity's capacity for both cruelty and compassion. Her observation about the ease with which people judge and criticize others speaks to a cultural moment defined by social media outrage and ideological tribalism. The practice of extending grace to those who seem undeserving requires a kind of spiritual maturity that most people spend lifetimes developing. Her revelation about maintaining a prayer list that includes her critics represents a radical reimagining of how to respond to hostility. This practice transforms enemies into prayer requests, criticism into opportunities for spiritual growth. The parallel to historical examples of praying for one's persecutors gives her contemporary struggle ancient roots, connecting her experience to a tradition of radical love that spans centuries. This is not passive acceptance of mistreatment but active engagement with the spiritual challenge that opposition presents. The connection she draws between Keanu's journey and her own illuminates the social dimension of personal faith. When she speaks of faith changing how people treat each other, she is describing transformation that extends beyond individual salvation to community healing. This vision of faith as fundamentally relational challenges privatized religion that focuses solely on personal benefits while ignoring collective responsibility. Keanu's agreement carries the weight of someone who has experienced this truth firsthand. His simple statement about the cumulative power of individual kindness articulates a theory of social change that operates through multiplication rather than force. The idea that small improvements in individual behavior could transform entire communities offers hope to people who feel overwhelmed by the scale of contemporary problems. Their discussion of faith's broader impact reveals a shared understanding of purpose that transcends personal fulfillment. Keanu's confession about his evolving definition of success speaks to a spiritual maturation that many people experience as they move beyond purely material measures of achievement. The realization that fame and wealth, while not inherently evil, cannot provide the deeper satisfaction that comes from meaningful contribution represents a hard-won wisdom. His commitment to creating good things, however small, reflects a humble approach to influence that contrasts sharply with grandiose promises of world-changing impact. This is spirituality grounded in practical action rather than abstract idealism. Oprah's agreement and her explanation of her own motivation for continuing her work despite decades of success reveals a shared commitment to hope as active practice rather than passive sentiment. The camera's movement to capture audience reactions creates a visual representation of the conversation's expanding impact. The nodding heads and visible emotion suggest that this dialogue between two celebrities has touched something deeper than entertainment. The social media responses appearing on screen provide real-time evidence that the conversation is sparking reflection and conversation far beyond the studio walls. The moment when Oprah and Keanu clasp hands transforms the interview into something approaching ceremony. This simple gesture carries symbolic weight that transcends the immediate relationship between interviewer and guest. It becomes a visual representation of connection across difference, unity despite distinct journeys, solidarity in the face of shared human struggles. Oprah's acknowledgement of Keanu's courage in opening doors for others seeking meaning carries the weight of someone who understands the responsibility that comes with platform and influence. Her recognition that vulnerability requires bravery validates the risk he has taken in sharing his most private spiritual experiences. Keanu's response, crediting her with giving him the courage to share, creates a circle of mutual empowerment that exemplifies the communal nature of authentic faith. The standing ovation that erupts as they rise together becomes more than appreciation for entertainment. The sustained applause carries the gratitude of people who have witnessed something rare in contemporary culture: authentic vulnerability without agenda, spiritual exploration without manipulation, celebrity used in service of connection rather than separation. Oprah's closing words transform the conversation from isolated experience to ongoing movement. Her invitation for continued sharing through social media creates space for the dialogue to continue beyond the constraints of television programming. The hashtag becomes more than marketing device, evolving into a digital congregation where people can continue the conversation in their own contexts and communities. The final image of the entire audience rising, many visibly moved to tears, creates a powerful conclusion that suggests transformation has occurred not just on stage but throughout the room. This is the kind of moment that becomes culturally significant not because it was manufactured for viral consumption, but because it touched something authentic in human experience that people hunger to share with others who might understand their own spiritual questions and longings. This extraordinary conversation between Keanu Reeves and Oprah Winfrey serves as a profound reminder that faith is never a destination we finally reach, but an ongoing journey of discovering meaning, transcending loss, and spreading compassion to everyone we encounter. From my personal perspective, I deeply believe that the raw honesty and courageous vulnerability they demonstrated tonight has the power to fundamentally transform how we connect with one another as human beings. Their example challenges us to live with greater kindness, to truly listen with our hearts, and to actively search for light even in our darkest moments. Please follow Motivation for Success to continue receiving inspiration through powerful stories of hope and transformation that can change your life. Subscribe to our channel and share your own favorite story of breakthrough and faith with our growing community.